So hello and welcome. Very excited about today's presentation. We've got a shaker named Alan with us, a mover named Karla, and a prover named Kevin. I am going to go ahead and turn this over to all of you. And so I'm going to invite you. I think, Karla, you're the one going to show your screen, and please feel free to take over.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you so much for having us here today. We're so excited to share this. Now, I'm going to take a couple minutes to introduce our team here. So I'm Karla. I'm the CEO of the People Catalyst, and I've started my first company when I was 20, just fell in love when, and I moved into business commercial finance really quickly, fell in love with entrepreneurs who believed in things unseen and wanted to put their dent on the universe. So I've been on a roller coaster ride from there in supporting businesses and business owners. And then we have our co-founder here, Alan Fadden. Alan has had the most incredible art, and I am the mover. We always work in teams, and you'll see during the presentation today why we do that. I'm a mover. Alan is the Uber shaker. And so Alan has had an incredible background, worked with, Paul McCartney, Bill Murray, just about almost every Fortune 100 company. He's been speaking for a long time. He's a top it's not number one, but how many awards have you won for advertising?
I don't know, maybe 100, something like that.
I mean, it's amazing. And so he's really fun, and he used to be a stand-up comedian. So if you ever want to have a really fun meeting, make sure Alan's in it, because he always has something really fun and cool to add. And then we also have our other co-founder here, Kevin Notestein. Kevin is our prover. And you'll learn what that means later on in the training. Kevin has flown over 100 combat missions. He was prior Air Force. He has been an instructor pilot for 25 plus years. So although he teaches and trains utilizing our methodology, and the Air Force happened to be one of our clients as well. And Kevin is incredible at teaching us how to run all of the back office and technology things too. So computer science was his major, and he will jump in. And the reason we have all three of us on the presentation is because I will go ahead and move the presentation forward. Alan will be interjecting. He tells stories a lot better, and he comes up with some really cool ideas or things that I necessarily kind of run over a little bit, being a mover. And then Kevin will interject when we forget anything. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to talk about today is the way we work has not changed since the 19th century, okay? So we approach the 21st century with a 19th century work style. So that means that 100% of the work is made for 1% of the population. So there's only 1% that can come up with ideas really, really easily, pick the best ideas, set of ideas, create a plan around those ideas, then poke all the holes into the ideas, and then do the day-to-day mundane thing that needs to happen. Yet 100% of the work is made for that 1% of the population that can do all of those things. So it doesn't have to be this way. There is a better way. We're going to talk about it today. And that's why we're aiming to revolutionize the way work is done. So we're here to have you join us in revolutionizing work. So I don't know if everybody's seen this before. In records, Gallup has done this study for the past 30 years. And according to their world poll, many people in the world hate their job. And it's roughly 89% of workers are not engaged. And what if we could change that, right? It would make the world so much better if we did better. And that was Gallup. So I'm sure a lot of you know who Gallup is. And this is why we see this outside of restaurants. Oh, you hate your job? Why didn't you say so? There's a support group for that. It's called Everybody, and they meet at the bar. And that's a real thing that was outside of a cocktail bar. So how does 70% of people hating their job affect their health, their family life? I mean, we spend more time at our jobs than we do with our family, and every other aspect of their life, especially You know, again, we spend more time at work than anywhere else. So what if we replaced "this place sucks," or even my job, or my whatever it is that you're doing day in and day out, with those 4 core natures of work, to "leaving this place sucks"? So the importance of agile, what we're going to talk about here today, is how to get things done. And a part of getting things done, I'm sure you've heard of agile. Most people in the tech world, they know it because they've been utilizing it for the last 25 years. However, agile just means that, to be able to move, to be able to develop new innovations, new ideas with technology. It's more critical than ever. And this came out of an article in Forbes. With the growing recognition that agile is eating the world, surveys by Deloitte and McKinsey show that more than 90% of senior executives give high priority to becoming agile. I would say that's even more too for startups. And this is how many are agile. So 90% are saying that it is really critical and important, and 10% are actually being able to fill that need. And 84% of executives say their future success is dependent on innovation. And again, more than ever, because things are changing so quickly. We've got new innovations day in and day out. We've got companies that are like Uber and Airbnb that are dominating the marketplace. And Airbnb, who knew that the largest hoteler would never have any real estate, right? Although 77% of CEOs find it difficult to get the innovation skills that they need. And in that same study, innovation ranked #1 on the top business priorities. So this is a quote from Peter Drucker. I don't know if you guys read his book. He was incredible, saw so many new innovations before they happened and how business was going to be changing. And he says, innovation is easy. Just put people in teams. It's just no one knows how to do it. And we are going to teach you today how that is possible. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Alan, here in discussing the 3 levels of innovation, because you always tell stories so much better than I.
You're very kind. Okay, so incremental is level #1. That is the smallest level of innovation. And you'll see that when companies choose an idea, it's generally an incremental idea. It means we'll just move it a little bit forward, and hopefully we can do that. And probably the best example I can think of, the most famous example of incremental innovation, would be Jeff Bezos. When he started Amazon, his mission was to be, you ready for this, the best bookstore on the internet. So obviously they have shot past that, but they've shot past that over 25 years. And so what would he do but just introduce little things like reviews, and they make it a little better, a little better, a little better, a little better. And finally they'd have something that was wonderful. Now, they didn't make any money for Karla. You know how many years that is.
14 years.
They had a market cap of like 125 billion when Barnes and Nobles was only like 25 billion. And Barnes and Nobles had 400 bricks and mortar stores, and Amazon had almost nothing physical. So there's the lowest level of innovation. Now, if you want to dominate a market, then that's probably not for you. But most companies wind up there because people tend to cancel each other out. Next level of innovation is breakthrough. Now, breakthrough innovation is when you've got something that's new to category, and a lot of people will import something that works, say, in a different category. The British store Marks and Spencer wanted to do custom-made sandwiches, but the problem was that really was their bottleneck is to get any volume on it. They had to be able to spread butter on a piece of bread better, and nobody knew how to do that. But somebody who had been there from the printing industry realized that what they could do is silk screen using a process that prints t-shirts. They could silk screen the shape of bread and put that onto the bread and print it on the bread rather than t-shirts. And suddenly the bottleneck was gone, and they could mass customize these sandwiches. So breakthrough, incremental is probably not new to much of anything. It's just a little nudge ahead. Breakthrough is something, you're doing something new to category, but you may import it from another category. third one, which is the most unique, is radical innovation. And of course, that is the least practiced because every idea is born drowning, and it usually has as much wrong with it as it does right with it. So a good example of that, and go back to incremental, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, he's but if he's not, he's on his way to being one of the first $1 trillion companies, but also on their way to becoming a $1 trillion company is Apple. Now, Apple under Steve Jobs was a radical innovator. Jeff Bezos said, let's be the best bookstore in the world, incremental. Steve Jobs says, let's do things that are insanely great. Keyword, insanely. And so what he would do is try to revolutionize every market that he got into. And people credit the iPhone as being one of the, be like the electricity or the telephone at the beginning of the 20th century. Here's something that completely changed the game. And all he did was ask his engineers, if you were doing a cell phone that pleased you, what would it be? And boom, it was very little about a phone. It was about a map, and it was about music, and just about everything else in your life. So there's radical innovation. Now, while breakthrough is new to category, radical is new to world. There was no iPhone before Steve Jobs, and a few years before, he did another piece of radical innovation. Everybody's so bored with their beige boxes of computers. He's the one who introduced colors like purple and orange and aqua, and then put it in. If you remember the iMac that looked like a TV set, an old-time TV set, but a kind of a radical-looking body behind it. He basically turned tech into fashion, two opposites. He jumped to the opposite side. Those are the kinds of ideas that few companies are able to implement.
Awesome, thank you. And you could just keep on rolling there.
Keep on rolling. So now here's a perfect symbol of radical innovation. Sometimes you can find your radical innovations in a place that's right in front of you. For money, I carry nothing but $2 bills. Why do I carry twos? Because I like to hand a $2 bill to a cashier. Can't do that too much today, but I like to watch and see what the cashier does with it, because there are no drawers and cash registers for $2 bills, and I like to watch people make decisions. And you can tell a lot about a person with what they do with a $2 bill, because a $2 bill is an unusual idea, and those are the hardest to implement. So you'll find that about when you give a $2 bill to about 85% of the people, just like a new idea, you're not going to get a happy result.
See, there was a couple people that have been arrested.
Yeah, that's right, because somebody's never seen a $2 bill before. If you hand a $2 bill to a person we call a maker, that person looks at the $2 bill, and a maker is a person who obeys the rules. A place for everything in its place. They don't see a slot for it. They go and ask the manager, and then they say to the manager, I've never seen one of these before. Are you sure it's real? The manager says, I haven't seen it either. Let's call the police. It must be counterfeit. And they do, and sometimes they've even taken somebody down to the station, actually in an Arby's in Minneapolis. So, but if you hand a $2 bill, on the other hand, to somebody who's a shaker like me who loves new ideas, they'll say, "Hey, look at this, man! I'm going to take that, put it in my wallet, put a couple ones in the till. I love that." So you've got a different reaction from different people. A person who is a prover, they'll kind of look at the provers like to make the rules, and they'll look at that, and then they'll look at you, and then they'll look at the bill, and they'll say, "You better give me another bill. I'm not going to take that." And it's only a person called a mover, and that is Karla, a mover who says, "Give me that." And they kind of ruin my fun. They pick up the slots in the cash register drawer, and they shove the $2 bill underneath, put it back down, and they've totally ruined my fun, because I like to mess with people, and you can't mess with a mover on something like that, because they just love a new idea and they know what to do with it. So we all need our movers. That's only 15% of the population. So if you have an idea, especially if it gets breakthrough or radical, you've got to get a who to go to. Who's your who to go to? If you're a shaker, your who to go is a mover. Bring that big idea to a mover, because they'll find a way to get it done if it makes sense. So,
awesome. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the first dysfunctional meeting as well, because we've all been in that meeting, right? That everyone's there, you're trying to get something done, and it ends up turning into a skeet shoot more, which is idea, bang, idea, bang, idea. And everybody's tired, disengaged, and they just want to leave. So I'm not sure, I guess you could use the chat, but Alan, if you want to go through the story of this signing of the...
Well, you know, it turns out that not everybody was for the revolution. A lot of people were against it. They liked it the way it was with Great Britain, and they just wanted to stay there. And then there were a few people who just didn't want their names mentioned to anybody, because this was a problem even being in this meeting. And so what happened was they, despite all the obstacles, they actually formed a new country. But just like every other idea, they are dying on the vine unless you get somebody who's actively for it.
Yes. So 33% wanted to go back to Great Britain, 33% wanted the revolution, and 33% just didn't want their name mentioned at all. Doesn't that sound like some meetings you've been in before? So we're going to talk today about how does it feel to do more with less? Of course, it feels good, right? To be effective. And we're going to teach you how to be 3 to 8 times faster with better results. And so the first two do, actually, Alan, do you want to go ahead and take the story over again?
Yeah, it's when the automobile industry was formed, you're not going to believe this, but see that guy there with who's on the right side of the picture? He built the entire car, and that was an assistant who'd hand him things, the guy with the hat on. And so that's the way cars were built. One person had a pile of parts in front of them, and they would assemble the car from scratch until they were done, and then they'd start on the next car. And now it's interesting because so if they had a bunch of people doing that, do you think everybody would, even though they finished at about 12 and a half hours assembly time, would they have gone at the same rate? Well, it turns out they didn't. One person was good at transmissions, another one was good at engines, another person was good at interiors, another person good at exteriors, but they all arrived at the same place. But Ford noticed that they all had different talents, and the person who did engines best would do it fastest. So what he did was he changed the whole thing. He did it backwards. Instead of one person doing one car, he had one person do all the engines. They put everything on a conveyor belt. Now, the old production time was 12 and a half hours. The new production time, after 6 months at their Highland Park plant, dropped to 1 hour and 26 minutes. And I asked most people, what would you think it dropped to? And they said, I don't know, like 5 hours, 4 hours, something. No, 1 hour and 26 minutes. That's like an 8 to 1 advantage. Now, why is that important? Well, if you look at the price of the original car, the Ford, it was about $4,000. Well, after 6 months, they were able to drop the price to $600. Now, how's that for competitive advantage when everybody else is selling the same car for $4,000? You're selling yours for $600. In fact, Ford, wasn't his idea, but his chief financial officer, or whatever they called him at the time, the bean counter, said, hey, why don't we double the workers' wages? And Ford said, oh, we can't do that. And then he thought about it and he says, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we should do that. Why? Because for the first time, they were able to afford the car. Now, what happened here? This innovation in the way we worked with tangible things, physical things, drove the adoption of the automobile. Only the elite could afford it at $4,000. At $6,000, a lot of people could afford it. Now, what would happen if people were driving around in cars? Got to put your imagination on here. Well, guess what? There weren't very many roads. So with all these cars, what did people do? They started building roads. And once they built the roads, well, they said, well, if people can go a long ways, what if they can't get back home? Oh, let's build a hotel. So they built a hotel for them along the way. And it said, wait a minute, people got to eat. Let's build some restaurants. Let's build gas stations. Now that was about 1912 they started this, and the economy boomed until 1929 when the stock market crashed. That's 17 years of prosperity driven by a single idea. Now here we are in an economy where most of our work is intangible. It's not tangible. Most of the businesses are service businesses or have a service wrap around them. Well, nobody has done this until now for intangible work. What do we do with an idea? How do we write software? So that's we're doing a radical innovation that for some reason just didn't get done for 100 years.
Mm-hmm. And here's a couple examples of some clients that are, both of these were intangible, right, Alan?
Yeah, I believe so.
Intangible assets. Just two examples of customers we've had the opportunity to serve that have implemented this. And by the way, implemented might be far after we were not working with them still. However, they kept the process going. And that's a big part we're going to talk about today, is that it's great to understand the knowledge, but continually applying the knowledge. And so this particular company was generating about 77 million in annual revenue. They cut
7 million.
Or I'm sorry, 7 million, and thank you, in annual revenue. And they ended up cutting 10% of the workforce. And then they told and wasn't it Christmas time, Alan?
Yes, it was.
And then they told the remaining 90% that they're going to have to more than double the revenue, right? So you can imagine how fantastic these particular employees felt. Well, HR brought us in, and we were able to not only do the 15 million, but do 29.7 million that year. And how much do they have in backlogged as well for the following year? They couldn't hire enough people to.
They had another 40 million that they couldn't move fast enough to get it into the year. And this 29.7 was at a 48% profit margin. And they froze every competitor out of the business that year. Any significant piece of business this company got.
Yeah, it was impressive. And then there is another company, this is a telecommunications company, that had many different areas of the business because it's a very large company. But this particular division, when the rest of the company was flat, utilized the methodology, and over 24 months grew their division from 20 million to 60 million. And so this is an example of how this works. And actually, Alan, if you want to go ahead and walk through this particular, actually, you know what I'm going to do? Kevin, you jump in now because you built this slide, and I think you did a really great job on how you laid out the different core natures of work that were on the team. And this was a sales team, and we needed to shift the way that they were doing their follow-up that they were required after they had gone to a sales, on a sales call.
I'm happy to share about this. Now, we're going to be explaining later on what we mean by mover, shaker, prover, and maker, but with just a quick introduction, the shakers of the world, like I can't tell, they're new idea people. They can give you new ideas, and they're really good at working with people and very innovative on items. And that's one group of people on this one. Makers, they're the people, they like to follow the checklist. They're really good at the logistics. They're great at the details on what they do. And this particular company that we worked with, their sales team, the leadership wanted them to follow a nice old school way of doing things and do a follow-up letter that they would send to potential clients after each meeting with them. Well, the first person you see here is the shaker one. Well, each one of the shakers, they said, okay, I've got to write a letter. That's easy. I can write a letter. And they'd sit down and they'd write the letter in 10 minutes. Well, they wanted to mail the letter. Well, holy cow, how do I do that? I got to find the address. I got to find the envelope. I got to get a stamp. I got to find the right place to
put it in the database. I'm just glad because I hate putting data entry into the database.
Right. And
it takes me 2 minutes to write it, and it's the same kind of thing. It's like, so I check my email, look at Facebook, all these other things installed to be able to do those logistic items, right?
Right. So as they're getting distracted and everything else, and oh, I'm going to go ahead and read this thing real quick. And I got this text message in the middle of doing that. Well, it ends up taking them the rest of an hour. It takes another 50 minutes for the people, for the Shakers, to actually get that letter in an envelope with an address and ready to be sent. Well, there was one guy on the team that was a maker. And for him, doing the logistics, that was simple. Heck, he knows exactly where everything is. He can follow the process. He can get the address. He can put it on the envelope. It's natural. It's just who he is and what he does. But to actually write a letter and to know what to say and how to build a relationship, for him, that was a big challenge. So with each one of them, the way before they implemented our methodology in the organization, it took each one of them about an hour to do the letter. And if you look at the chart here, you can see that that meant it was 600 minutes of work. And we talk about our peak work and our week work and what we do. The green time there is when they're working in their bliss and when they're in their peak work. And you can see for each one of the Shakers, hey, those 10 minutes of writing it, they loved it. And for that maker, that 10 minutes of actually getting the envelope, he loved it. So that's their peak work. But the rest of that time was all just wasted and painful for them. So after we went in, worked with them, changed their methodology, it brought up a little bit of a change of how things worked. We changed it and we said, you know what? Shakers, all you have to do is write your letter. Like, I don't have to mail it? No, you don't have to. So all the Shakers, all they had to do is write their own letter. So each of them got to do that. And then once they're done writing their letter, they would give it to the maker. And the maker would say, okay, I can easily get the rest of this done. So it'd take the maker 10 minutes to mail each one of the letters and get it ready. So you can see his line on the bottom where he's doing a lot more time on there. Each of the Shakers are down to just 10 minutes apiece. And instead of the maker having to write his own letter, one of the Shakers would write it for him. So one of the Shakers would write the letter, write his for him, and only 10 minutes there. They're happy to do it. And you can see it moved it from 600 minutes of work down to 200 minutes of work. And every single bit of that was people working in their peak work and not having to do the drudgery, the painful parts that they did not enjoy.
And what the new innovation here really was is that a lot of people have this idea or mentality, well, they're in sales, how can they work together, right? And so that is, one way that teams can facilitate, even though they're individual sales people, understanding who's on the team, what their core nature of work is, how to put those right people in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And so, Alan, would you like to share the story of Sean and Peter? This is probably one of my favorite stories because it took about 15 minutes, if that, maybe 5 to fix. Alan, you probably know better than I, about individuals that are having significant conflict and just understanding, and we'll get a little bit more into the red light, yellow light, green light relationships, but if you could just quickly go through this, Alan, so we can get to the mover, shaker, prover, maker, and all the detail piece.
Yes, so these are two guys who were working in Alaska for a client of ours who's a large oil exploration company. So they're on the slope. And one of the things about, if you've ever been in Alaska in a winter, it's a long, dark night. And, it's not really a perfect environment. So what we had is the orthodoxy, the common wisdom of both Sean and Peter. They each had 2 major functions, and their job was exactly the same, because that was the wisdom. Is what you do is you train everybody for the same job. And so what happened is that about half of Sean's work was what they call help desk. They were in tech. So if somebody had a problem with the computer, they'd call. And that was also half of Peter's work. So the other similarity was that half of Sean's work was also what's called server maintenance, and also half of Peter's job. Now, both of them were unhappy with their jobs, and they didn't like each other either. So this was a problem. And so we did a phone call, and in a very short period of time, we realized that Sean, and of course you can tell we're using lettering here because that's not his real name, Sean is a shaker. That means he's great at ideas, likes a lot of variety in his work. And Peter was a prover. And Peter wanted to do more things that were precise and didn't like to be interrupted. So help desk was great for Sean, a shaker, because he always got new and different problems, got to solve them all. A lot of variety, loved that part of it. Peter hated that part. Peter was a prover, didn't like being interrupted, thought that a lot of these problems were silly, and why didn't people just learn about their computer? Now, the opposite was true when it came to server maintenance. Sean didn't like server maintenance because it was boring. He was all alone, and he just had to do this routine. It just bored him to death. Peter loved it. It was elegant. He got to fine tune everything. And so in this situation, both of them did half their jobs that they loved and half that they hated. Now, key question, when Sean was doing help desk, which he loved, could he do it fast? Absolutely. And he wouldn't spend much time on it. So the other thing is that when he was doing server maintenance, he spent a lot of time on it because he couldn't even focus. We'll get into more about that later. But so what we did with Sean and Peter, we said, okay, Sean, why don't you do all the help desk? And Peter, you can put a sign on your door that points an arrow at Sean's door that says, help desk, see Sean. Then you'll never get interrupted. Meanwhile, what's the quid pro quo is that Peter got to do all the server maintenance. Well, that's fine because Peter loved the elegance like that of doing that. He was happy as a clam. Sean hated it. So we put them both in their peak work. And so not only did their performance improve about 3 to 1, just as you talked about the letter writing, but they really loved their work because they were spending much more of their time doing what they're great at. And in fact, they even started to like each other, sort of.
Imagine that, right? And so a lot of times we think it's our personalities, and really it's about the core nature of work and what part of the work you do well. So this is just a quick example that just a teeny little tweak made all of the input for not only their work and the quality of the work, but their just their livelihood, because they were hating what they did. And so these are just a couple of the companies that utilize this. And we're going to talk about weak work versus peak work. And I know that, I believe, Kevin, you brought this up a little bit. Weak work, this is how we feel when we're doing things we really aren't great at, when we're not in the zone, when we're not humming, when it's just like trudging through mud, right? Versus peak work, which is really easy. It gives us energy. We love it because we can do it quickly. We get rewarded and complimented by those things that we do and do really well. Although only, I think it's 7 or 8% of our time is spent in our peak work versus our weak work. And this just really doesn't make any sense, because if your day was 50% weak work and 50% peak work, would you spend 50% of your time on each? And the truth of the matter is not at all. It's 90-10. So it takes those items that were supposed to take up half of your day, you zoom through them, you get through them, you love them so much that it's easy for you. And then you spend the balance of your day, 90%, trudging through that mud. And it's one of the biggest reasons why 70% of people hate their job. So everybody's been in this meeting, right? It's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And it just, there's nothing going. Or you're getting this idea of the disengagement, because every single core nature of work disengages for a particular reason. And I think a lot of individuals have seen, I think, Simon Sinek's Start With Why TED Talk. And he talks about people buy why you do something, not what you do something. What we're going to talk about, which we completely agree, based off the same law of diffusion of innovations, 110 years of marketing research of how people adopt new ideas. What we're going to talk about is, who do you go to and when do you go to them? So the law of diffusion of innovations, I said 110 years of marketing research about how people adopt new ideas. We use this quite frequently with customers. Jeffrey Moore Crossing the Chasm, the tipping point. I mean, this is the largest body of marketing research that exists. So of course, there's a lot of different methodologies that are based off of it. And so the first 2.5% of the population, these are innovators, all right? They're the Jeff Bezos, or not Jeff Bezos, what's the Apple?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, yeah. Steve Jobs of the world, right? That can come up with these new crazy ideas, right? And then you've got your early adopters. These are 13.5% of the population that aren't quite the innovators, but they're willing to try something new that hasn't been proven. And then you've got the 34%, which is the early majority, 34% that is the late majority. They do want to make sure that something's proven before they purchase it. And you can see why they use this in customers, right? You wouldn't want to go to the late majority with a brand new iPhone that just came out. And then you've got the laggards. This is 16% of the population that will not buy an electronic car until there are no gas stations left on the planet, okay? And so these are the four core natures of work and where they approximately lie on the law of diffusion of innovation. So the shakers are those innovators and early adopters. Movers are, they're still early adopters, but they're the early majority. The late majority is your provers, and then your makers, those are the ones that are just, the innovation physically hurts them because they just got done cleaning up this place the last time a new idea came in here. And so then we also take a look and overlay not only with the law of diffusion of innovations, but are you a thinker? So these are individuals that are thinking in their mind. And a lot of times we don't value this enough, right? Because we don't think it's doing work. Well, thinking is actually a part of doing work. It's just different than those of us like me who are doers, who really like to get into action, pretty much want everything done yesterday, and there is no finish line, right? And so what we do is we overlay, are you a doer or thinker, and change at the top there is early adopter and keep late adopter. And so a mover is a doer that's an early adopter. A shaker is a thinker that is an early adopter. A prover is a thinker that is a late adopter, and a maker is a doer that is a late adopter. And so we like to use the example of a remote control. So a shaker is like the power button. They're gonna, start shaking things up and come up with ideas and start the process. And then a mover is like your fast forward button. They're really great at grabbing the idea and moving it and pressing it forward. Your prover is like your rewind button because they're gonna like, whoa, wait, we gotta back up here. You guys are going too fast. And then your maker is like the play button because they're the ones that can do that day-to-day thing that needs to get done, because we all get to a point where things just need to be repeated. After we find a process, it needs to be repeated over and over. You'll see there's a button there in the middle, and that's a oneer. So that's the 1% of the population. We don't really teach to the oneer because it really involves all four core natures of work, but they're like your utility infielder on your baseball team. They can do all of it, not super well, but they can play first base, second base, third base, but there's a reason why they're not primarily picked for one of those bases, right? Because they can move and move between all four core natures of work. It's just they're not expressly driven on one of them, like for myself as a mover. And so this is just an example of how you can take this and layer out your team. Is actually a made-up team that we just created. But as you can see, when you start laying out, and even if you're a solopreneur, you have a team. One of our clients has 5,000 real estate professionals, and they kept on saying, well, I don't have a team. I don't have a team. Yes, you do. You look at your CPA, your colleagues. Some of my best team members are just colleagues that might be Uber shakers that I need to go to when I have a technology issue and they're a shaker, which would be totally different than going to somebody that I had a technology issue and they were a prover, right? So you can see this team is way over on the early adopter and thinker side, right? A little bit less on the doing side. But the whole point is to be able to coordinate your team to understand who is on your team. And I'll talk a little bit, I think I wanna identify sometimes the easiest way to understand mover, shaker, prover, maker is the negative names that we call these individuals, which is really actually pathetic that this is how we communicate, but it's what we do. So a shaker is somebody we go, squirrel, or your head's always in the clouds. Man, you've got shiny object syndrome. Or when we were working with the Air Force, they call them, I found out, the chief idea fairy. And so those are all the negative terms. Instead of like holding them in their magnificence, we hold them in their smallness. So a shaker is really great at coming up with ideas fast. It doesn't mean it's the best idea, but they have a really easy way to see innovation and completely can, their run home to mommy is a new idea. So when you don't use the process, a shaker left to their own regard, that's what they're going to do. Always come up with a new idea. Hence the reason why they probably have the shiny object name that we constantly use with them. And a shaker will say no to a new idea if it's not their own. Okay, and then you've got a mover. A mover, the negative things that we say about a mover is, gosh, you're so bossy. Do you always have to be in charge? Why is it you always want it done yesterday and didn't even thank me for the thing that I did, right now? And you're always telling me that I have to move to the next thing. And so, but really movers are great at, picking the best set of ideas and then moving that project forward. So a prover, this is the person we go, gosh, you're such a Eeyore. They write books about this person. Oh, you're Debbie Downer. Man, you're such a pessimist, right? Even though they're great at poking all the holes and everything. And then you've got a maker. This is a person that is great at doing the day-to-day mundane things. But, I'll call a maker. We go, man, you've been coming to the same meeting on Wednesdays at 8 a.m. You never have anything to say. Why don't you ever have anything to contribute? Don't you ever have any unique ideas? Right? And it's just, we're different. We need them all. We need you all. We just need you at different times with a process. And so here are a lot of reasons why conflict happens in the workplace. We call this red light, yellow light, green light. And it's to understand the dynamics of the relationships between all four core natures of work. And so first you've got your movers, your shakers, and your provers and makers. So movers and shakers have a green light relationship because movers love to come up with ideas. Shakers love to come up with ideas. Well, I love ideas as a mover. So Alan and I get along really well because he's great at coming up with the ideas, and I love picking the best set of ideas and creating a plan around how we can actually make that happen. Now, provers and makers have a green light relationship because provers, as we said before, like to make the rules. Makers like to follow the rules. So provers can really get into the details and give the instructions that makers need in order to do that day-to-day work. And they have the patience to be able to do that. Hence the reason why there's a lot of red on here, because movers and makers, the challenge is movers, someone like me, I just don't have the patience to get into the specific detailed instructions that a later adopter needs. They need a process. They can edit the process and make it better, but they need to be given those instructions, or else it's really, really challenging for them. I mean, it hurts them when there's a new idea and you're like, but you didn't tell me what to do. And so makers and movers are a red light relationship. Then you've got your shakers and makers. Okay, these guys are completely from different planets, because here you've got an early adopter that's a thinker, and you've got a later adopter that's a doer. I mean, they just see the world and the world of work in such a different way that when you put them together, they just don't understand each other. And quite frankly, there can create a lot of conflict there, because you got one that's coming up with ideas, one that needs instructions, and it's like, okay. And Alan has a couple of really funny stories. We'll have to tell if we have some time at the end of this, because I want to make sure we're moving along here. And then we've got the prover and the shaker are a red light relationship, because the shaker's coming up with an idea and the prover's saying everything that's going to go wrong. So it goes idea, bang, and the shaker's like, you don't like my idea? You don't like me. And the prover's like, well, it's not, I got to tell you what's going to go wrong with it, or else why would you even continue, going where you're going with the idea? And so provers and shakers are a red light relationship. Then it brings us to the bridge, which is a really critical part of your team, is the yellow light relationship. And that's a prover and a mover. And the reason why they're a yellow light relationship is they're quite different in how they see work, but they understand that they're the bridge. They need each other because of the bridge between the early adoption and the late adoption. So they are the kind of handshake between the two to be able to then get that project moving forward and not only figure out what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. And when you are in ideation, what are we going to do? And then implementation, how are we going to do it? So ideation, the mover is the facilitator. In implementation, then you hand that baton over to the prover, and the prover then is managing the implementation of the process. You still use all 4 core natures of work, you just use them in different ways with a slightly different process. And so the input for a shaker is reality. This is where we're at. This is what we have to do. This is the problem we have to solve. And their output is ideas, okay? So the input box, just think of like an inbox and an outbox on your desk. The inbox for a mover is ideas, and the outbox is the plan. The inbox for a prover is having a plan, because the worst thing you could ever give to a prover is a blank piece of paper and say, go for it, right? Or even a maker for that matter. They're great at editing, but they need a plan to start with in order to get them to be able to implement the idea. Now, this is ideation here. Remember I talked about there's two processes, ideation and implementation. So with ideation, the way you work this is you come up with the idea, mover picks the best idea, set of ideas, prover pokes all the holes in the ideas, and then you go back to the shaker and you say, hey, so if Kevin's poking all the holes into it, I go back to Alan, I go, Alan, how can we overcome all of these obstacles that Kevin came up with? And then Alan comes up with the ideas. And then Kevin goes, you know what, that actually could solve that, but that's going to create another problem. So we still have a problem with this idea before we implement it. So we go back to Alan. Alan, how can we overcome this? Well, we could try this. We could move this way. We could potentially use this software to, and then again, I facilitate it back to Kevin. And we run this process over and over. And the stopping point of the ideation process is when the prover says, I can live with that, because now you've got buy-in from this entire team. They built something better together. And the fact that you've got them to buy into the aspect of Shaker got to put his thumbprint on it. Prover got to do what he does best, which is to poke all the holes in it. And a mover just got a really good idea that they can move forward with the team that they know that they need in order to get things done. So after you get to that point, the second piece here is implementation. So now that the prover has a plan and is happy with the potential challenges being overcome before you press them to implementation, the prover then looks at it and creates instructions. And instructions is after they've gone back and forth of saying, this is a good idea, this is what we're going to do. Now we have instructions for moving forward. The inbox for the maker is instructions. And so then the outbox for the maker is reality. So say, for instance, we implemented a process, the maker starts eating their checklist for breakfast, and they go, you know what, you actually didn't think about the fact that we've never taken deliveries in the outside. Instead of, they've always gone out. So what's that going to do? And then you go back into the process, right? And so what happens in our work life often is that there's this conflict. And often, our core natures of work cancel each other out. So think about it. Alan's core nature of work is shaker. Kevin's approver. You put them in a room, they're just going to their brilliance literally cancels the other person's brilliance out. And we think it's because, that they don't like each other personally. But when you think about, Sean and Peter, it wasn't so much that they didn't like each other. It was the fact that they were so different and they didn't understand each other. And they both had to do half of the other person's work because, okay, everybody has to be doing the same thing. That's just the culture or the way we do things around here. And it creates this conflict. And it's why we don't get across the finish line or get really frustrated and go back and forth. And Alan, if you want to take over and with the relay race as far as the high school team and Olympic.
Yes. Does anybody know the world record for the 400-meter dash? That's a track event, one of the most grueling. It's too long to sprint, and it's too short to kind of dog it, because somebody's gonna pass you up. Somebody who wants it more is gonna beat you. But so one of the toughest races there is, 400 meters. Anybody got any ideas? Kevin, have you checked the
chat box?
Yeah.
Yep, we're looking.
Okay.
I know, but I'd be cheating.
Yeah. Well, cheating is fun. Oh, there's
I've got some coming to me personally. Somebody was guessing about 2 minutes.
okay. Well, yeah, it's that's a really really good guess. It's actually it's 43.7 seconds, I believe it is.
I think you're right. I was going to say 42.7, but I think you're right. It's 43.
43.7. Now, think about that. That is 400 meters in a tough race. Now, interesting thing, there are pretty good high school teams, you know, who you'd never get a world record, who can run this thing like 2 to 3 seconds faster than the world record. But the key is that these are not individuals, but they're relay teams. And so obviously, as tipped off by the visual, a relay team is much faster. Now, start thinking about why it's faster. Well, one thing is instead of one person running 400 meters, it's 4 people running 100 meters. They call it the 4 by 100. Now, 100 meters is a distance you can run without losing all of your ATP. You know, it's the person who slows down the least who wins that race. And most people can keep all their energy during that race. But here's another question. Does it matter in a relay team who the starter is, who the middle people are, and who is the finisher? So think about that. In a relay team, the last person's called the anchor person. They're your fastest runner usually. If you've got a lead, they'll sprint their way home and they'll keep the lead. If you're behind, they may even catch up and win the race for you. Now, is that different, say, from the person in the number 1 position? Well, that person's the one with the best reflexes. They actually start in a position where their nose is about 6 inches from the ground. They're crouched down waiting for a gun to go off, and if you go too soon, you've scratched. If you've done that twice, then you lose the race. You're out of the race. They start too slowly, they've lost the lead, and you're in the hole already. That person's got a completely different set of skills. And then, of course, the 2 people in the middle, the second and the third, well, they actually take a handoff and give a handoff. So they have twice the number of handoffs that 1 and 4 have. Number 1 just gives a handoff. Number 4 just takes a handoff. So, and of course, if you drop the baton, you're disqualified. So these are all important positions, but they require different strengths. And as we say, different core natures. Now, managers arbitrarily would go in and say, "Oh, let's move these around. You know, you're probably tired of being the anchor person. We'll put you at number 2. We'll put the number 1 person at number 3, number 3 at number 4, and so on." Well, would the team be faster or would they be slower?
Yeah. And it's a good point, you know, and so one of the things that I always like to visualize with the relay race, because that's really what we're, and we'll share a white paper with you and a couple other things as we're wrapping up here. We can tell you where to go to get those. Is that, can you imagine if a relay team, you stole the baton from each other, ran across each other's lanes, but that's exactly what we do in business and every single day, instead of going one at a time and have a process. So I want everybody to write this down. 94% of failure is process failure, not people failure. And that was Edward Deming. So he's considered the father of manufacturing, really the father of processes. And so what happens is we do that relay, we run in each other's lanes, we steal the baton from each other, and then, we start blaming each other instead of realizing we need a process by which I decide what to do, ideation, and implementation. How are we going to do it? And that's what we're talking about today. The Hoodoo method is a process that you can use. First, figure out who is on your team and having a who to go to, because of course it seems crazy. Why would a coach ever move the relay team around in different areas? But again, that's exactly what we do every single day in business, and I would venture even to say in life. So Here's a fun little thing we'll wrap it up with here is, what's the big campaign idea? We're going digital, Facebook, YouTube, a mobile app, Pinterest. What are you going to do in all those channels? I don't know. We'll figure it out later. Who's ever been in that meeting? And so with that, why don't we take some questions? I think there's a couple there. Kevin, if you can jump in there. And then also if you could include the email address that we want, probably info@thepeoplecatalyst.com. The website is up there, guys. For right now, we are revalidating. We changed the nomenclature, although this intellectual property is 30 years old. We changed the nomenclature recently, so we're having it revalidated. So if you go to the website, you can scroll down and it says take the assessment. And that'll probably be up for another maybe week or so, because the validation should be coming back here shortly. And then of course, we're gonna have to develop some software behind it. Typically it's not free, but we do, it is access to our certified trainers, but right now it's free. So go there, check it out, and find out if you're a mover, shaker, prover, or maker. And we did not go into combinations today. So for instance, I am a mover shaker. So that just means that I'm way more mover than I am the idea person. Although it is a secondary core nature of work, I'm not great at it, but I can really tap in to even Alan being the mover shaker because I do like new ideas. So with that said, Kevin, do you see, I see a couple Q&As there, although it's on my second screen over here, not my main.
Yeah, and to let you know, Karla, when I send a link out to everybody who registered with access to this recording on YouTube, I will include your email and I'll include your website so they have immediate access to it and can reach out to you directly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. Appreciate that.
Yep, and you had mentioned me, just one of the questions that came in privately was asking me how do I know what I am? How do I know if I'm a mover? Or...
There you go. So you can go ahead and take the assessment that is on the front of the website, or wait for the link that Kathy sends out. And it's a quick 7 to 10 minutes, depending on, some people find it more challenging. Some people find it really easy to prioritize the questions that are on there. There's 12 questions that you're going to prioritize, and then it'll send you an automated link into your email, and then you'll have the entire example. And it not only says what you are, but you're going to be able to read all the other 4 core natures of work. Because, and I get this question all the time, like, if I'm a maker, you know, can I facilitate this? Absolutely. You just have to understand who the other people are on your team and the process. So you can utilize this and facilitate it no matter what core nature of work you are. It will be easiest, I will tell you, if you are a mover, because we just have a natural tendency to be that facilitator, that project manager. And then we also understand that, you know, we have to have other people do things. And it's just more natural to movers. But that doesn't mean you can't have your who to go to. Go find your mover, go find your shaker, go find your, and you have to have both, because over here you've got Peter Drucker, right? Innovation is easy, just put people in teams. The problem is nobody knows how to do it, right? So you know you need innovation, you know you need R&D. But Warren Buffett over here is, you know, he was speaking at the Fortune Innovation Convention with Alan here, and it was funny. I don't even know if he's been quoted as saying it, but he did say it at the mic. Is he steps up to the mic and goes, "I don't know why I'm speaking at an innovation meeting. I hate innovation." And he was saying that he just needs to put money into a place where you print money, right? And so we need you all. We just need you at different times. Are there any more questions there, Kevin? I think I see 2 on the Q&A.
Bringing that up. I missed it, but is there a general guideline for good team balance of these players?
That's a great question. And Alan, feel free to jump in on this a little bit after I chat. So if you were missing one person on the team, you're likely to run into problems. 2, it's a complete disaster typically. And so yes, you want to have all 4 core natures of work. However, without the process, when you have a balanced team, it can have its own challenges in its own right. So although you need all 4 core natures of work to show up, and again, we have makers that might be outsource individuals that are doing that maker work day in and day out. So think out of the box about how you could find the team members. But yes, having all 4 core natures of work, identifying, making sure they know the process so that when you're coordinating it, they understand the, you know, the method that you're using in order to get things done. And so, Alan, did you want to piggyback that? There's a podcast actually on that, Jennifer. If you go to the podcast area and we did an entire podcast on the challenge of working with a balanced team, because believe it or not, even if you have a balanced team, a lot of times they have a little bit more challenging issues because it's brilliant. They've got diversity, but they don't have a process. And so they don't necessarily appreciate that diversity.
Yes. So diversity and conflict increase at about the same rate. So the more diverse, you need a diverse team. You need all four core natures on the team, but then as you're increasing your aptitude for success by having them, which is absolutely necessary, you're also increasing your ability to have conflict because of the red light relationships. And so the beautiful thing is that to use an old metaphor, everyone has a natural inbox and a natural outbox. And what you want to do, it's about fit and sequence to manage the potential for conflict. If you can match your outbox with the inbox of somebody who is next. So I'm a shaker. I go to Karla with my ideas. My outbox is ideas. Her inbox is ideas. And so that's how you increase your diversity and chance of success, and then also put the clamps down on your chance of failure because there's so many diverse points of view as you do it one after one. As Karla says, you know, we need you all. We just don't need you all at the same time. Be sure you line up your outbox with the next inbox and they do the same thing. And you can do that by using our relay process.
And the power of that, Jennifer, is that when you do that and the team just moves so much more quickly and beautifully together, you can get so much more, you know, done as you're, so even if your, you know, maker is an outsourced, you know, virtual assistant or something like that, having them, you know, understand the process and understanding why, and have your who to go to, because the who to go to for a maker during implementation is a prover. You actually work it backwards. The maker would go to the prover would go to the mover would go to the shaker. Do you see how we did that? Green light, yellow light, green light, right? If it's the maker going to the shaker for the idea, then you end up getting conflict because they're just come from 2 different planets and they're trying to solve a problem when they completely see the world in 2 different ways. All right, are we good?
I think another good item of looking at that is you think about life cycle. And we need everybody just at different times. And you look at how many people, or just when you bring them in. You know, if you think about Uber, when they first started out, it started out with a new idea of how to do things, and they needed innovators to come up with a concept. They needed innovators to write the software. They needed or have the concept on the software and starting those out. Well, now Uber has grown dramatically. Well, a lot of things, what they've brought in a lot of makers that are actually doing the work. So the balance, your number of people involved shifts over time. But you know what? To stay up, they still need the innovation going on. So on that slide that Karla showed about the reality, it is a life cycle that goes on, but at different times of your business, you're going to need a different balance of how many people are involved.
That's a good point. If you're in the earlier stages versus the later stages, right?
But even in those later stages, you still have a new reality because you got to stay fresh.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, it is now a couple minutes after 2. Kathy, thank you so much for allowing us to have this time with the organization, and whatever we can do to help. We are just 100% focused on revolutionizing the way work is done and helping people get things done and be 3 to 8 times faster with this 100% buy-in from their team. So whatever we can do to help support you and your members, do not hesitate to let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was fabulous. That was a lot of fun. I'm guessing people enjoyed that thoroughly. We will, of course, send everybody the link to it on YouTube, so you have a chance to go back to it and see it again and get more from that. We'll pass that on. With everything going on in today's world, we have many more that registered that I'm guessing got pulled into other things. So we'll get this to them as well. And we'll include those links in emails. So thank you so very much. It was
Fantastic.
fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care.